It's time. Oh, there's John.
Water Quality
Here we go.
Management Committee meeting Thursday, May 3rd, 2018 will come to order. We have the first item on the agenda. This may appear to be Groundhog Day for anybody who watched our last meeting, because the same topic was brought up at our last meeting. At that time, it was new news that a grant application had been accepted. This time, it's a presentation by one of our members, Matt Charette, on the proposal that he submitted and the role that he wants the Water Quality Committee in the town to play in making it happen. You're on.
Great. So yes, as you said, I'm here today to seek the committee's help in partnering on this EPA SNEP grant for a permeable reactive barrier at Shorewood Drive. And this proposal was submitted as a pre-proposal back in the end of March and was approved for a full proposal submission due on June 8th. So right now, the document that you received with your meeting agenda earlier in the week was the pre-proposal, and I'm in the process of working on the full proposal, which is much more extensive, as you might imagine. And for the full proposal, the partnerships have to be formalized, and we're going to need actual formal letters of commitment from the different partners. So that's why I'm here today, to talk to you about this. So very briefly, I think I'm preaching to the choir here. Most of you know what a PRB is, permeable reactive barrier. But in brief, the idea is that the bacteria that perform this process called denitrification in an aquifer are limited in their availability of carbon. So by adding a carbon source, in this case it would be a food grade product, emulsified vegetable oil, or EVO, would stimulate this process, the conversion of nitrate, which is what's clogging up our estuaries with algae, to inert nitrogen gas. And so the idea is that injecting this EVO into an aquifer nitrate plume close to the point of discharge, so near a surface water body, has the potential to remove potentially significant amounts of nitrate and thereby reducing its impacts on coastal water quality. So some of the benefits of this approach compared with other ways of dealing with nitrogen, including sewers, is that you would be treating all groundwater nitrogen sources, not just wastewater, but those that enter the aquifer from fertilizers or from the atmosphere. It would involve minimal infrastructure. The operation and maintenance costs of such a PRB would be minimal. And perhaps most importantly, in addition to the potential cost savings, is in theory you would see immediate reduction in watershed nitrogen load, because you don't have to wait for all of that nitrogen that's being taken out from, let's say, a sewer system technology to be flushed out of the system. You're treating it right before it's discharging, and so you might see a positive impacts right away. So the proposal would be to install a PRB at the town-owned 0 Shorewood Drive property in
You want the lights down?
East Falmouth, Massachusetts. I think that might be helpful for the figure there on the right. There you go. That's better.
You got it.
So this town-owned parcel was actually part of a prior EPA study that wrapped up about a year and a half ago to survey different locations on Cape Cod for PRB suitability. And so we have a lot of great background information that's already been done going into this project. And we know exactly how much nitrogen this PRB could be expected to remove if it's successful. So the figure on the right here, I'm trying to get my cursor to work, I don't know if you can see that, is showing in the red squares or diamonds the 200-foot long permeable reactive barrier that's oriented roughly at a 45-degree angle to Route 28. This is Route 28 here in East Falmouth. This is Shorewood Drive here. This is, these are the Coonamessett, this is the Coonamessett River, correct? And then this is the head of Great Pond here.
Correct.
So 200 feet on a diagonal through this property, and it would treat a 20-foot section, a 20-foot deep nitrate plume that was identified in this EPA study. And so that, if we were to treat a 20-foot tall section of the aquifer by 200 feet long, and we were able to capture all of the nitrate and convert it to nitrogen gas, that would be expected to remove 330 kilograms per year, or equivalent to about 82 homes at 4 kilograms of nitrogen per year. There would be a series of monitoring wells, 2 lines of monitoring wells, upstream and downstream of the PRB, so 2 before monitoring wells and 6 after monitoring wells, so to speak. And over the course of 2 years, on a quarterly basis, we would monitor not only the nitrate concentration in the groundwaters, but also we'd be monitoring for organic carbon, alkalinity, trace metals. We want to make sure, not only do we want to understand how this PRB is working, but we also want to make sure that there aren't any unintended consequences of installing the PRB. So we've got all the appropriate measurements in the budget to deal with that issue. So partnerships are very important for this project. So it's one of the key evaluation criteria. And so I'm planning to partner with Tom Cambereri and others at the Cape Cod Commission, among other things, to work with them to get this PRB technology. We would develop a user's manual at the end of the project, and that would get incorporated into their website technology matrix that they've developed for various alternative technologies to sewering on Cape Cod. We would partner with the Wacoit Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve, and specifically we would have a speaking slot at their annual Cape Coastal Conference. So that would allow us to help disseminate the outcome of this project to a broader audience. And then why I'm here today is to propose a partnership with the Falmouth Water Quality Management Committee, and that's detailed in this final slide here. So the idea is that the Water Quality Management Committee would serve as sort of a stakeholder advisory board for the duration of the project, and I'm proposing that myself and my team would have quarterly meetings with the PRB working group, which we already have in place. And if we assume 3 members, not including myself, a 2-hour meeting, 1 hour to review documents prior to the meeting, 4 meetings per year times 3 years, 108 hours, and then offset by about a few weeks, we would have then a quarterly update to the Water Quality Management Committee, basically reporting out from the PRB working group to the broader membership of the Water Quality Management Committee, 6 members times 2 hours member time, 4 meetings per year, over 3 years, or 144 hours. And that results in a total in-kind contribution request that we would like to add to the proposal for these 2 activities of 252 hours times the allowable volunteer rate that's set forth by the EPA in the request for proposals of $24.14 an hour, or $6,083 over the 3-year period.
Which is reasonable and less than you put in the pre-proposal that came in the year.
Our value went down since last week.
That's correct. When I sat down to actually do the math and figure out what was a reasonable amount of time, it came out to, about a third of the original amount.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We have, you know, yeah.
I think Steve was pointing out the hourly rate went down since last week, too.
Oh, no, I didn't
No.
notice that.
$27.
No, the
If
number-
I said
the amount of
27,
work.
I misspoke, but
Okay.
this is 24 is what the allowable amount
Okay.
is in the
All right.
RFP.
Well, this,
But that's why we stopped working, we're getting paid less.
So that's what I'm thinking. On my resume, it's gonna look pretty bad forward.
this proposal is remarkably similar to one that this committee had put together and submitted in the past, so it's something that clearly the committee wanted to do and was thrilled that someone else has picked up the ball and run with it. As a matter of sort of protocol, I think Matt really can't participate as a voting member and probably not even in the discussion. You're clearly a presenter of this plan, but that's the limit of what your participation can be here, just to stay on the right side of the rules.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Matt, I just wonder if maybe you'd make a little bit stronger case in the full proposal for just how bad things have been in the upper reaches of Great Pond, a couple summers worth of bad news, and make it clear that this is a really bad spot. Fortuitously, it's a place with high groundwater flow, and the groundwater has a fairly high nitrate source. So it's a confluence of things where if we're going to see an effect, this should do it, right? I mean, so I think if you focus it even more and say this is a real, I hate to use the term sweet spot, but that's what it is. We got a bunch of things coming together because we already know that Great Pond is really suffering. And sure, we got the Coonamessett River right there, but we've also got this other stuff
Right.
going on.
Well taken. The pre-proposal was 2 pages. I should have more room to expand.
Right,
upon
that's what I'm
that.
thinking, just some
That's
brief
great, yeah.
synopsis of the last couple of years or whatever, and make it clear that we've got a spot where nitrate is a real problem, and we might have something that's a pretty substantial, at least partial solution.
Any other comments?
Oh, you're finished? I mean, Matt's finished?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm sorry, yes, that's my last slide.
okay. No, I think this is great. I assume the proposal is much bigger than the pre-proposal.
That's correct. I believe I have 15 pages in the full proposal.
I mean, I thought the pre-proposal was pretty impressive. In fact, I was thinking, well, what's he going to put in the main proposal? It's got to be 5 times. But since you do put in more stuff, this is similar to what Tom just said. Maybe put in something about how this dovetails with other approaches to Great Pond.
Yeah.
In case somebody is thinking, well, this alone doesn't meet the TMDL.
Right.
Right, this is clearly not going
Right.
to meet the
But it's a
TMDL.
start,
This
we
is just a piece of a larger picture.
That's right, and it's a pilot.
And it's yes.
You might want to put in that we have identified a few other sites in town where this could work, and if it did, it would, at least in the Boynes Pond, it would help
Right,
make it a place where we didn't have to sewer if it did work.
right.
So it has
That's a good
a
point.
wider benefit than just this one spot.
And, well,
And therefore, this investment in this project is amortized over that much more potential future gains.
And if I could just build on that, we know that the more impaired areas of each of these estuaries is the northern
Right,
reach, the northern ends of it. And that's where this could be duplicated. It's at the northern ends of several others. We're looking at, for instance, at Bourne's Pond. It's always been talked that there would be a PRB at the north end of Bourne's Pond, and might work for Green Pond too. The second point to make is that because of its location at the northern end of the estuary, it intercepts some of the groundwater coming from the upper watershed. And that, there's no intent really to sewer north of Route 28. So you're intercepting groundwater from the upper watershed where other choices other than IAs are limited.
and Matt, I was wondering, are there any municipal services that in effect that Falmouth DPW or somebody could contribute? I don't know whether there's no real site preparation. Is there anything where they could?
Well, actually, thanks for bringing that up. So I guess that was a question I had for the committee, is that I think we would need some help from the
Good.
DPW.
Yeah,
Even though the site was cleared for the EPA study, that's a couple of years old, so it's overgrown, so that would probably need to be dealt with. And then in the location where these new monitoring wells would go, likely haven't been cleared. So there would be areas new areas that need to be
Yeah.
cleared a little bit for
Yeah.
a drilling truck to get in.
It was basically cleared to install the monitoring wells. And there was more or less an existing path. Which-
yeah, it's misplaced on that
It's
map.
misplaced
Matt
on the
told me.
map, but to the north, the one that runs more or less northwest, southeast, just needs to be moved up a little bit. So that path was there and that was widened, but the cross section, which is the red circles with the yellow rims to them, none of that was cleared because it wasn't designed at the time.
Right.
So there definitely, I'm familiar with the site, there's definitely brush there that
Yeah.
we would need more clearing. So we would have to ask.
Right.
But it might be a day's work to get the site prepared.
I'm just looking at all these different places where we can show a non-federal
Right. And
contribution.
I did fly this by the town attorney, and he pointed out, if you're doing a test well, you're gonna need a license from the selectmen as well as from DEP, I believe.
for any kind of groundwater monitoring well?
Right.
Okay.
Oh,
No.
No, it's from the Board of Health. We license all the wells in town. So,
How did we install all of these previous wells without any licenses?
You're in trouble, you have to appear before
Yeah.
the Board of Health now.
Strike that.
Luckily, there's nobody from the enterprise here today, so word won't,
Just a few hundred people watching on television.
right, in real time.
It may be an issue, you better check it.
Okay, I mean, it can't, I hurt to
Okay.
ask, that wouldn't be too.
But I think John is correct. It's the Board of Health.
It would
Okay.
make sense, yeah.
We will,
Didn't I send you an email? You sent me one back saying,
There are two issues. One is monitoring wells, which have all been, quote, temporary, which is maybe why we didn't have to go with the Board of Health. But these would probably be permanent. And the second is that specifically where the permeable reactive barrier is located, there will be an injection of a substance, which
Right.
is the EVO. And that requires a permit from the DEP. They have an established process. It's not particularly complicated. You actually do it online. And it's called an underground injection
control,
permit.
yeah,
No, I hope-
UIC.
Yeah.
I hope it would be one permit for all the wells at once, not
yes.
each well.
That, based on the Orleans experience, that's correct.
Yep.
It's
And
one
another
area.
thing, this is not really germane to today's discussion, but what's the marginal cost of adding on to the length of the barrier?
So.
I mean, once you've got equipment there and all, I
Yeah.
assume,
So for the pre-proposal, if you read it, you'll know that I put in a placeholder for a contractor
yeah,
with a fixed amount.
right.
So I've since decided, in the interest of having a little more cost certainty going into the full proposal evaluation, to try to identify a partner
Yeah.
now, rather
Right.
than if it gets funded. So, what was your original
Well, I just,
question?
you mentioned in there, depending on how much it actually costs
Yes,
to
right.
have the
So-
wells, the insertion
Correct.
wells done,
Right.
there was the chance to extend it.
Yes, so I've had preliminary discussions with a couple of potentially interested parties, and we talked about that issue. And there may actually not be too many economies of scale. In other
Oh.
words, to put in a 100-foot PRB would cost half as much as putting in a 200-foot PRB.
Yeah, I was wondering what the
Or-
fit was, yeah.
Or thereabouts, but that question will be
Yeah,
I will be getting more clarity on that question in the next
good.
few
Yeah, I
days.
just thought if we had the chance to extend it, even if it was 25%,
Yeah,
it would be kind of a shame to miss the opportunity.
right. So, I mean, in the proposal, there's, a limit to, a cap to how much you can
Mhm.
ask for in this particular competition. Yeah, I don't know where we're going to
Right.
land when this
Yep.
companies come back with their quotes, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. It may not be able to afford to put in a 200-foot PRB, it may be 150, I don't know. But I don't think that's the main point here. This is
No,
a
it's not. In this
demonstration.
case, I said it's not really germane to today's
Right.
discussion, which gets back.
But
have you-
it's something on my mind, yeah.
Okay, so have you crafted a motion that you'd like to see come out of the
I
meeting?
think
or
that would
you-
have to come from,
Yeah, we'll figure that
Yeah.
out. Steve?
This, what I'm about to say is obvious to all of us, but it may not be obvious to your reviewers. And that's to point out to them that the Water Quality Committee in the town of Falmouth is already highly invested in this idea. I mean, you don't want to make it sound like we already did practically the whole thing and you're just me too, but, because you're not. But it shows our obvious dedication as one of your partners and our obvious perception of the need for it and value of it.
How far along Virginia is Orleans with,
Orleans has it installed, they have a year of data, they found that they had made some mistakes in the direction of the groundwater, so they were not getting the removal that they'd expected. They also found that there was another input upstream. They had been told that a particular septic area had been abandoned, but subsequently found that that was not necessarily true. So they've sort of, they've
they're
had some.
feeling their way through it?
That's right. I want to add to the note about the investment and our interest in this. The town has spent a lot of time and energy understanding where you can install them, just from a logistical point of view. And we have narrowed that down to a couple of places where we've actually put in monitoring wells to look at concentration of groundwater and whether there are any other problems in terms of lack of oxygen or sulfate and so on and so forth. The information that we are missing, I think, is in two parts. One is that the standard discussion is the injection wells are 10 feet apart, and when you inject, it has a radius of about 10 feet. But what is not really known is whether it should be 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, or should it be offset in sort of a zigzag way. So there's a design element that is still unknown in terms of having the quantity of EVO that's going in, how it's actually dispensed, let's put it that way. And the second piece that is really missing is how long does it last? And that's a question that only time is going to answer. And, you know, we hope it lasts 5 years. We hope it lasts 10. But we don't know. And the DEP ultimately isn't going to really permit this unless they have hard data. So until we get a PRB installed that is functioning properly, and groundwater is all lined up and so on, we can't really answer the second question of how long it will last because we haven't really started. So I see those as we're finally getting to what I think are some of the central questions that the DEP will ask.
right, and the how long it lasts issue is central to the issue of cost. Is it a cost competitive
Right.
That's right, yes.
technology?
When's the next time that you inject?
Right.
But that first question about the staggering,
Yes.
you may not want to mention unless you have a plan for answering it, which is the obvious controlled experiment, but you're not proposing that, right?
Well, I just want to comment. Actually, if you look very closely at this map, which was done by the EPA contractor based on the information, and we were just looking ahead. So this was the end of our relationship with the EPA and their grant. You will notice that there is a zigzag line for 100 feet, and then there's a straight line for the other 100 feet. So we hypothesized that if we could put in a 200-foot PRB, we would do half of it in zigzag and half of it straight to see if there was any difference. And that's the second reason why these two lines of monitoring wells that are at right angles to the PRB itself that's why they're there. It's so that they can look at what's happening to the single string, what's happening to the double zigzag.
And you're planning to do that in yours?
I am now.
Matt and I discussed that a little bit earlier.
This is what
And things are
happens
coming to light.
when you're whipping up a pre-proposal and, yeah.
But.
48
the fact-
hours notice.
The fact that you're being honest, I mean, thanks to the fact that you're being honest and admitting you know now, implies that you need to rethink whether the position and number of the monitoring wells is adequate, because you were obviously thinking about it as a continuous isomorphic, I mean, unchanging distribution of wells, so that all of your downstream were measuring one kind of thing and all of your upstream were measuring one kind of thing. Once you split it, you cut N in half. You don't have to answer that now.
Yeah.
but-
mhm.
All right. Any further discussion? I have a motion which can certainly be,
I have a suggestion, and that is that we actually compose the letter of commitment, that you said a formal letter is required, and then the committee would vote on the letter once.
well, he needs to
This
vote
he needs to know
today
now.
So he can
Oh.
get to the selectmen before
Oh,
the grant deadline. That's
I,
what.
okay, then I'm happy
Like
to,
they said, we can do the.
Well, you
letter
tell me,
later.
I actually don't know the Board of Selectmen's, when I could actually get on their schedule.
Well, they're meeting this Monday, and it's too late for that, so the
That's
next
right.
one's 2 weeks later.
It is, okay, they're separated by 2 weeks, so.
okay, usually. Okay, so we do need a vote, okay?
We can't make it contingent on trusting you to write a reasonable letter?
No, of course you can.
No, but I'm thinking, we could get the letter written and then do an email ballot, right? We don't have to,
We don't-
We'll be
Once we
meeting
vote
again
to
before the
commit.
letter is needed.
That's
yeah.
right, yeah.
Can I ask a question? Is the letter of commitment coming from the Town of Falmouth Board of Selectmen, or is it coming from the Water Quality Committee?
You tell me. I mean, I think I'm asking for, does the Water Quality Committee have the authority to write, support letters on their own?
Well, we certainly can if the selectmen adopt our request
Right.
Right.
that they approve.
But I also
participation in
think
this
there's
package.
a little greater throw weight if it comes
From the-
directly over the seal of the town of Falmouth, too.
And since they own the land,
Yeah.
the select, it's under the
I think
control of the-
both.
I can ask for both.
I think a letter from this committee talking about our interest in the stuff that's been, already gone on, a little brief anecdotal history of our interest in PRBs and the fact that it's a big,
Yes.
substantial component of ours, along with an endorsement from the board,
You're right.
would do it.
Because some bean counter is going to say, do you have control of this parcel? Or does one of your partners?
Yeah,
Yes.
And you want to have something that
Yep.
answers
Yes.
it.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we'll try this on for size and we can hack away at it here. I move that we request the Board of Selectmen to approve Town and Water Quality Committee in-kind participation with, the partnership rather, in-kind partnership with the Woods Hole Hydrographic Institution in a PRB installation at Sherwood Drive to be funded through EPA's SNEP grant. Something like that.
That sounds
To the
very good, and I
extent
hope
of-
Eric got that.
Of the number of hours that he has? it there?
You don't have to put that, so.
Oh.
Yeah, that'll come
and I'll
back.
second that motion.
Further discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? Guys have it. You got it.
Okay.
We'll get something to the selectmen so their next meeting can take it up if they're so inclined.
And would I, in terms of the DPW buy-in, is that completely,
We should let them know that this is contemplated, but until the selectmen have said it's okay, we can't really chase them too much further.
But in our letter to selectmen, might we suggest that some sort of DPW,
Well, you sure should mention it to
Or would it be-
DPW
would
before the
be-
selectmen's meeting, in case they're there and saying, who's committing us to this? We've never heard of it.
that's
Right.
what, that's what I'm
No, we
asking.
will
How
do
would I
that.
go about getting buy-in from the DPW? Do
Yeah.
I bring it up in the Board of Selectmen, presentation to the Board of Selectmen, or
Well, we,
DP
I wouldn't
DPW?
bother.
well, we'll
Why?
see them sometime
Yeah.
between now and the
I mean, you're
selectmen
asking the
meeting.
Board of Selectmen to be able to participate in the program.
yeah.
Right.
I don't think you need to get into the weeds about whether you're going to ask the DPW to go in and do a little clearing.
That, it's not going to happen for at least 6 months, right?
Yeah, oh, right. And I guess the only thing is, I don't think I need it, but if I'm going to put it down as in-kind contribution from the
Well,
town.
whatever we send to the selectmen, we'll send a copy of the DPW and we'll make sure they know that we're talking about
Okay.
Perfect.
some role of theirs.
Okay.
Can we call it town resources, that we're perhaps contemplating some contribution of town resources, which of course would be personnel and equipment? I'm
Town,
trying to figure out the best way to phrase it, but that's what we're talking about, is some actual,
what we got now is town in-kind partnership.
yeah,
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
DPW would still be in kind. It's just that he'd be able to monetize it and put it into his budget.
Right.
That's the gain there.
It's not going to be a huge
No.
cost share, so I'm not
Exactly.
too worried about it, but.
Okay. All right. We'll work on what the memo to the selectmen should look like.
All right, this is wonderful, given the fact that you're doing exactly what we wanted to do and we're not paying the nickel for it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay, reports of members and staff. At least
Aye.
one person, two people, three people went to a meeting this morning. You want
Oh,
to get a word out on that one?
John, you want to say something?
Well, we had a meeting with Brian Dudley and Corin Peterson from the coalition, just discussing again our management plan for a watershed plan for IAs, building on the draft that we had from October of 2017. And we made some minor adjustments to it, and Brian, I think, was fairly favorably inclined. And I guess the next step will be for us to stick it in our CWMP and see whether they'll actually approve it.
who's controlling the document to include the minor adjustments?
I've already put them in, and Eric has a copy and Steve has a copy.
Yeah, but we need to get this electronically and have
There
it
was
sort
electronic
of
copy
on
sent
file.
earlier, but we can-
Well, Eric and I were going to
I'll
look at
forward
it,
it
make
to
sure we
Steve.
agree,
Okay.
and then,
Yeah, we forward it to us and we'll make sure that it,
Yes.
we all have everything.
And then
that
we
we
can
thought.
send it on to Eric and see.
Yes.
and can I mention another thing? Or are you-
Sure, no.
are you all set, John?
Yep.
A good issue was brought up that a key item we have to address is getting, hopefully, at least 2 types of IA systems up to the level of general approval. And we discussed various ways of doing that. And everybody agreed on that.
Agreed on having at least 2.
Agreed on the importance, well, I don't know, if the at least 2 is my business sense talking. So if you have only one, and it's proprietary,
Yeah.
the price is not going to come down.
That's right.
But the agreeing on having it at all, I think everybody agreed with, simply because the town is committing to a substantial number at that point. So you can't take the risk of not having it approved. And I guess DEP wouldn't approve it if it wasn't at general approval level, or there wasn't a clear path to general approval.
Great. Any other reports you had?
I just have an update on the Little Pond Sewer Service area, because we're about to hit a deadline. So in Falmouth Heights, there are 416 connections. They have 38 to go, and the deadline is the end of May 31st. In Mara Vista, there are 404 connections so far, and their deadline is actually a year from now, April 30th, 2019.
and what percent is that? Do you think?
And so together, that's a little more than 50% of the total number that needs to be connected. Mara Vista has a lot of residences, and it just, the number of plumbers that are available, it just will take time. So they've been given another year. Falmouth Heights was hooked up almost a year, I'm sorry, the pipes were in almost a year earlier, so they should be pretty close to being all hooked up. So this summer, basically, we'll have sort of half the flow from the service area, and we'll begin to find out, what the estimates were versus what the actual flow is. And I forgot to mention, there are 20 commercial that have also hooked up, and they're here, there, and everywhere.
So, a slightly peripheral issue. At town meeting, we had an article that wanted to double water meters at houses. And that's something we're going to have to deal with in the fall. And so what we've done on the Board of Health, we had an irrigation well regulation.
Okay.
And it was prohibitive in the sense that it had to be a certain number of feet from the property line.
Oh.
And we did that to avoid spite wells.
Mm-hmm.
But we've changed the regulation for little ponds, saying that in an area that's being served by town water and sewer, there's a real advantage of being able to put in an irrigation well because it's pulling out contaminated water and using it for irrigation. So what we want to do is encourage people down there to put in irrigation wells and not to invest in 2 water meters.
Yeah.
Right. But there's an additional piece which the water department didn't get to educate town meeting on because the article just didn't take off. And that is, an analysis was done of the 1,600, just to use a round number, parcels within the Little Pond Sewer Service Area as to how many of those parcels used more than the minimum amount of water. That, there's no sense having a second meter if you're only using the minimum. And it turned out it was nearly half. I mean, it was a high number. Most people just apparently didn't stop to think, am I actually...
Or even if it was just a little bit more,
Yeah,
it's still, you
it's
could
still-
figure out
it's-
where the break-even point would
That's
be.
right, that is not financially reasonable. There are other reasons why the particular idea in that article wasn't going to work, but the fact that so many of the properties don't use more than the minimum amount to begin with is a piece of information that needs to get out there.
Any other reports of members? Sia tells us that the fertilizer letter to the landscapers did go out to the landscapers, so they all know they can't fertilize within 100 feet of our water bodies. Okay, we have minutes of the prior meeting, which was April 26th. They were all sent around, everybody got a copy?
Yeah.
Everybody had a chance to look at them?
Yeah, there's a minor typo there at bold-faced 1, it's Woods Hole.
I thought you would catch that.
Oh,
Thank you,
You
Woods
put that
Hole.
in there?
have I set my filter too fine?
Oh, look at that.
Okay.
Woods, thank you very much, I will take care
Well,
of
I
that.
think other people must have found it already.
Okay,
It was a bold mistake.
yes. All right. I'll move the minutes with that minor correction.
Second.
Yes, and I'm in
Moved and
favor.
seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Okay.
And Virginia will pass along her great thanks that Eric is now back to do his
Yeah, I
task.
sure will. Thank you, Eric.
All right, schedule for the next meeting. We have 2 Thursdays still to come in this month. That we could pick from. Do we have any preference between the 17th and the 31st?
I prefer the 31st.
Yeah, I might too. It doesn't interfere with Memorial Day. Which
No.
was a-
No.
Which is good.
So we're,
And at this point, we don't really have anything lined up for the
Yeah,
17th, so at least
sure.
I'm not aware of any pending things.
17th?
So the 31st?
Is in, okay.
31st.
the 31st is where it's at, I guess.
Yeah.
And that probably works because the next week is July 4th week, and July 4th lands on a Wednesday, so we would be meeting on the Thursday and
What?
What? That's
No,
next
you're a
week.
month ahead of us, or beyond.
No, she's, well,
I am a month ahead of you, I'm so sorry.
Better that than be a month behind.
You're
It
absolutely
just
right.
feels like July.
It just feels, I'm sorry.
It's been a long winter.
Scratch that, yes, it sure has.
Yeah, June, the
Okay.
issue will be 7th and 21st.
Right, well, we'll
But
figure out
that's June.
what needs to be,
Yeah.
what work needs to be done.
All right, 31st it is.
Yes, good.
Matt, do we have a motion?
And then I'll move it to adjourn.
And I will second it.
Thanks, Matt, for your stuff on this. It looks good.
Yeah, moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, guys have it.
Matt, I have a small in the weeds.